I want to apologize straight away to Bernard Chapin. I obviously did not listen closely to what you said about Marcuse, because I looked up what I'm about to read over, and I found Marcuse popped up from Alexander Dugin's The Fourth Political Theory, Chapter 8, The Transformation of the Left. The New Left. The basic idea of the New Leftists is that bourgeois society is a result of many-faceted violence and oppression by the superstructures of the bourgeoisie political system, ordinary consciousness, the rule of elites, generally accepted philosophical systems, science, society, the market economy, and so on. Close parentheses. Bases and structures, again, parentheses, to define, also understood very broadly, including unconscious, proletariat, corporeity, mass, the experience of authentic existence, freedom, and justice. Close parentheses. Mr. Dugin is a very interesting writer. This must have been a hell of a book to edit. By such means, the new leftists, in contrast to the old leftists, mount a systematic critical attack on capitalist society simultaneously from all directions. From the political, the events of May 1968 in European capitals, to the cultural, philosophical, artistic, the very presentation of man, reason, science, and reality. In the course of this massive intellectual work, parentheses, to which, incidentally, neither the old leftists nor the neither the old leftists nor the national gauchists paid the slightest attention. The new leftists came to the conclusion that capitalism is not only socio-political evil, but the fundamental expression of a global lie concerning man, reality, reason, and society, and consequently, in capitalist society, as in the resulting moments, is concentrated the whole history of alienation. The new leftists reanimated Rousseau's idea of the noble savage and proposed an extensive panorama of an ideal society without exploitation, alienation, lies, suppression, or exclusion, by analogy with the archaic groups, which are motivated by the economy of gift. In this, he is apparently referring to a term by Marcel Mauss, from 1872 through 1950, was an influential French sociologist. In his 1923 book, The Gift, he studied archaic societies and discovered that their economies were based on a principal reciprocal exchange, rather than wealth accumulation as in modern societies. So now I'm going to pause here. Okay. Science itself. So we are now at decolonizing science. So we see this. This is happening now. Decolonizing science. We've gotten to there with the whole, remember, the Antifa now, their whole thing. There shouldn't be money, that you should be getting vouchers for things, stuff like that. They can't explain how a massive voucher economy would work. Now, if you really know your leftist degenerate culture, like I do, as I've slowly kind of realized what it all was, because one of the things that pops up is a very hush-hush thing. It's very hush-hush. Don't tell the guys about this. Literally, don't tell the guys about this. Gifting circles. Gifting circles are an old scam that ended up showing up in the festival and fair and basically the leftist degenerate culture. And I actually was I saw people personally discussing how this was this thing. Oh, and it's all women. It's almost always, by the end of the thing, only women involved. They're the ones who've provided the gifts and all this stuff, and only one typically comes out ahead. Her and maybe, a couple of her lieutenants. Rousseau, the noble savage, and all this business. Okay, so people who are doing this Black Lives Matter thing, what are they talking about when they say lives? Do they mean like not just the birth, not just like say the upbringing into adulthood, the full-grown adulthood? I'm presuming they're talking about. I mean, so in what way is like being mad at the police really doing something about Black lives as a continuum? Multiple Black people and their long-term outcomes. Well, you see, really, this no, they don't have to do that, because they don't have to be reasonable. Remember, reason is, well, let's see here. Let me make sure. Rules of elites, generally accepted philosophical systems. So that would be reason. Yes, you see, so they don't have to be reasonable. They do not have to be rational. Their entire ideology is that of the angry child who can just see what you're doing and say, I don't like that. That's pretty much what it is. And it's very handy to dislike capitalism because, I mean, you're getting paid to do something. If you don't do something people want, nobody will give you money for it. You won't be remunerated. And they don't like that. They don't like that. They want things. They want want stuff. And then, so there we go. So we've nailed it. And so the noble savage thing also is water keepers. They aren't activists. They aren't protesters. They're water protectors. These people are insisting on the Young Turks. You refer to them by the correct terminology, water protector. See, and if you refer, you're a racist. You're a fascist. You didn't call them water protector. You didn't call that dude a her. Even though it looks like a guy in a weird-ass outfit, you need to understand their pronouns. See, they don't have to be in any way ethical or moral. In fact, they would be a phony in the new left. You would be a phony. This is why nobody should ever accept democratic moral criticism, ever. This is the end of it. These people have confirmed, they're going through the checklist of what makes them the new left. These people are actually taking what is morality, what is science, what is reason, and they're twisting it so that they can undo it. They're actually in every era of time, they would be the definition at an essential level of evil, of the wicked. That they know that science is science. They know forensics says Mike Brown actually went for the officer's gun. They know the forensics says that. They know that really trial brings out lots and lots of testimony and there's cross-examinations. They know all this because they understand that there is reason. So they use it as a weapon. They go, I don't know, the police, ACAB, and all they have to do is scream it. And as long as they get enough people who are willing to burn your house down, they are correct because they're evil. They have been demented and deceived by evil, and it drives them to coercion. I'm of the Christian school of thought, so I really think that God created the evil intention, and the evil intention in man can take them over. And if you are wicked, it will take over your soul more and more and more because you'll have to depend on it. You'll have to depend upon the evil intention because the good is so painful after a while. But the power of the good must be endured because it makes one see the evil intention in himself. that they want to be an angry child who gets to burn things down if they don't get their way. They get to destroy the world if they don't get their way. The analysis of the New Leftists showed that modernity not only did not realize and practice its liberation slogans, but made the dictatorship of alienation even more rigid and repulsive, although hidden behind democratic and liberal facades. In this manner was the theory of postmodernism assembled, founded on the fact that, at the very foundation of the picture of the world, science, philosophy, and political ideologies which had been assembled at the dawn of the epoch of modernity or in the course of its development are strained interpretations, infelicities, delusions, and racist presuppositions which even theoretically block the possibility of liberating the structure, the base, from superstructures. This led to the reconsideration of the philosophical tradition of modernity with the unmasking of those mechanisms that concrete nodes of alienation in themselves. This practice received the name deconstruction, which proposes a careful and thorough structural analysis of the context from which one or another idea proceeded, with a detailed ex-articulation of the substantial nuclei from out of the layer of pathos, moralism, rhetorical figures, and conscious juggling. Foucault, in History of Madness and the Birth of the Clinic, showed that the contemporary relation to psychological disorders and, more broadly, I didn't mark that. I wanted to remember that. Boom, there we go, bam. Okay, sorry. Foucault, in History of Madness and the Birth of the Clinic, showed that the contemporary relation to the psychological disorders and more broadly to disease as such carries all the signs of intellectual racism, apartheid, and other totalitarian prejudices that become evident in the equation of the sick with the criminal and the structural identity of penitential and therapeutic establishments having been one and the same in the early stages of modernity. Bourgeois society, despite its mimicry and democratic facade, proves to be a totalitarian and disciplinarian society. What is more, at the center of this liberal dictatorship, the New Leftists recognize the deep and almost never doubted normative notions of reason, science, reality, society, and so on, and not only one or the other political and economic mechanisms, which are themselves consequences of the deep mechanisms of alienation. In this consists the main difference between the New Leftists and the Old Leftists. The New Leftists doubt the structure of reason. They contest the basis of our conception of reality, disrobe positive science as a mystification and dictatorship of the academic circles, Feyerabend and Kuhn, and sharply criticize the concept of man as a totalitarian abstraction. They do not believe that it is possible to change something by the path of evolution in the leftist manner of the existing system, but also contest the effectiveness of radical Marxism, noting that it did not overcome what it was supposed to, and that where it did, it was not orthodox Marxism. They borrow from Trotsky, the criticism of Stalinism, and the Soviet experience. And so the New Leftists formulate a vast project of the correct future in which the central place is occupied by the rejection of reason, the call to the conscious adoption of schizophrenia by Deleuze and Guattari, the renunciation of man as the measure of all things, the death of man of Levy, the death of the author of Barthes, overcoming of all sexual taboos, freedom to choose one's orientation, renunciation of the prohibition on incest, a refusal to recognize perversion as perversion, and so on. The legalization of all kinds of narcotics, including the hard ones, a move to new forms of spontaneous and sporadic being, the rhizome of Deleuze. I'm taking one of the things that this could be is those people who claim that they're like trans species or something. That I'm thinking that this would certainly apply, being that Deleuze is also cited in the idea of conscious adoption of schizophrenia. Um, the destruction of structural society and government in the service of new, free, anarchical communes. The book Empire by Negri and Hart, in which are given the theses of the new leftists, can be read as a political manifesto of these tendencies simplified to the point of primitiveness. Negri and Hart call the global capitalist system empire and identify it with globalism and American world government. In their opinion, globalism creates the conditions for a universal planetary revolution of the masses who, using the common character of globalism and its possibilities for communication and the wide open spread of knowledge, create a network of world sabotage. For the shift from humanity, standing out as the subject and object of oppression, hierarchical relations, exploitation, and disciplinarian strategies, to post-humanity, mutants, cyborgs, clones, and virtuality, and the free selection of gender, appearance, and individual rationality according to one's arbitrary rule and for any space of time. Negri and Hart think that this will lead to the freeing up of the creative potential of the masses, and at the same time to the destruction of the global power of empire. This theme is endlessly repeated in the cinematography in such films as The Matrix, The Boys Club, and so on. The anti-globalization movement, in whole, is oriented precisely to such a project of the future, and such actions as the conference in Sao Paulo. Those of you who are really on top of a lot of this shit, you know about that one. If I remember right, that's the sustainability one. That's the Agenda 21 conference, where anti-globalists first tried to aim at a common strategy, attest that the new leftist project is discovering forms of concrete political realization. Many concrete actions, gay parades, anti-globalization protests, Occupy Wall Street, the disturbances in immigrant suburbs of European cities, the rebelliousness of autonomous ones in defense of squatters' rights, broad social protests of new labor unions, all reminding one of a carnival. The movement for the legalization of drugs, ecological actions and protests and so on are included in this orientation. Moreover, postmodernism, as an artistic style having become the mainstream of contemporary Western art, expresses this very new left political philosophy, entering our way of life through pictures, design, or the films of Tarantino and Rodriguez. Without preliminary political philosophical analysis, outrunning our conscious selection, hooking itself into our minds without our knowledge or will. This is attended by both a general broadening of virtual communication technologies, which in their own system carry an implicit invitation to postmodernity, and the dispersion into post-human, hedonistic fragments, SMS and MMS messages, internet blogs, and video blogs, flash mobs, and other habitual engagements of contemporary youth in essence represent the realization of separate sides of the New Left project, which, it is true, being controlled by the bourgeoisie system, willingly profiting from a fashion that this time is not its own, but that of its hidden enemy. Here, we should say a few words about the relations of the new leftists and anti-globalists to contemporary liberals and globalists. As Marx thought in his time that capitalism, despite its horrors, was more progressive than feudalism and the Middle Ages, since it brings closer the onset of socialism, so contemporary postmodernists and new leftists, while harshly criticizing empire, stand in solidarity with it to some degree, as it, in their opinion, while aggravating alienation and strengthening its planetary dictatorship, latently prepares the world revolution of the masses. The New Left. Chapter 8, Transformation of the Left. Alexander Dugin's book, The Fourth Political Theory. If I remember, yes, 2012. So we relatively contemporary. The New Left does have an entry on Wikipedia. It has far more to do with the Frankfurt School and Marcuse, and it addresses the movement quite positively. So I recommend also looking at that so you can see another point of view, or just another point of view on it. It's because it's rather dry. It is not as widely cited as him, like where he really sees how the New Left ideology has come to manifestation within the culture and by more contemporary works such as The Matrix. The New Left is absolutely Fight Club. So this is something that really people who are alt-light, libertarians, alt-right should be very, very aware of. Because remember, there is also the fear of sort of how the Trotskyites ended up becoming a big part of the neocon movement. So it's just keep this in mind, because this has been coming up also among a lot of you who are like kind of you look askance now at the alt-right. You were into it, and then after a while you're like, I think a lot of these guys are just kind of leftists who kind of are LARPing as neos or something, and there's a variety of you who have different things to say about it, and I think it's because many of us are trying to find that delicate thing that it can't be found, it must be made in its culture, and it's starting to happen. It's really starting to happen among the Kekastanis. The Kekastanis are the art movement of whatever this dissident thing is that's so dissident against so many aspects of present-day governance in the Western world and sort of the watering down of the fundamental standards that many of us and our parents and our grandparents have been raised on and raised to uphold. In my view, because of the religious aspect, in my view, I think Anne Barnhart was more correct about it. Sacred vows. The concept of covenant and sacred vows. And that what is a man if his word is not gold? And that's because that's all people had. Any man who walks into town pretty much only has his word of honor. And that one time, because that did mean something. All people had to do was tell you to get out of town. Now, because the anonymity, because the alienation that technology does allow people, but also the interesting form of connectedness, you have these people who can just sort of offend the world and do fine at the end of the day and keep their belly full. In fact, people will bring them food for money. Not talking about anybody you guys know. But the New Left, the use of the term empire. Remember, cathedral, or we talk about the cathedral. It's very not dissimilar what the criticism of it is. Different, but not dissimilar. It's the throwing out of what is fundamentally rational epistemology, the throwing out of fundamental Aristotelian, Socratic methods of philosophy, because there isn't something called philosophy in other cultures. I really don't like how that it's uniquely a Greek thing that extended from Greece, because the Greeks developed philosophy, and what they developed, they said was different than the Egyptians. They got certain ideas from the Egyptians, but what they did was different. The Jews encountered philosophy and they rejected it. They said it didn't get to the point that they wanted to get, and that was the dvekut, I believe, cleaving with God. It's just the way that different cultures saw the methodology. Philosophy is a word from Greek, and so I like really kind of saying, no, this is a Greek thing that the Western Europeans eventually inherited, very luckily, very fortunately, even such that the theologians of the 15, or I know I could say 15 through 1700s would refer to philosophers who were in the present day. So they were saying these people operate on philosophy. So they weren't talking about them as Christian philosophers. No, they were saying they are philosophers. That they were trying to deal with humans' life, with the human life as a continuum through philosophy. That is why Stefan Molyneux is a philosopher with various ideas and kind of beliefs fundamentally about spirituality that he's brought up now and then, but not a lot. Yeah, so let me just leave it at that. I don't like when people talk about Buddhist philosophy. I don't like that, because it's like, if you know what they're referring to, you know this is an epistemological structure completely on its own and outside of Buddhism. This isn't even agreed upon in the Sanatana Dharma, the terminology. The Buddhists are using the terminology according to the Hindus incorrectly, and yeah, so it's in a similar to Christians and Jews, but also quite dissimilar because of the language differences and conceptual differences, because the language of Greek and Assyrian and then biblical Hebrew. There we go. Know these people. Know where these ideas have affected your own thinking, because some of them have been very good. Some of these have actually been somewhat good, where we've actually questioned. Remember, coffee was an intoxicant once. It's kind of good that people haven't looked back on coffee and said, well, it does make you get all excitable, and who knows what you'll do then. It's like, we haven't. New left. Remember, the new left is prohibition. It is the feminist and prohibitionist movement, because they were like this. The temperance and feminism were tied like this. They were the same voting bloc, the same argumentation, they were the same milieu of thought, and they were one of the beginnings of the new left. Don't marry up and keep these men from drinking. No, they shouldn't be spending their money on drink and in the card houses. They should be spending their money on wives. This turd-flinging monkey would say yes. So that's really what that was about. We want to say it's about other things, but that's what it was about. That's the whole idea. Is the new left gets the outcomes they want, and now they're at the stage of they are causing total chaos, and the very epistemological structure of what we call knowledge is falling apart, is collapsing in on itself. And there is an article out today that I think Breitbart actually published that says that if you look at SAT scores and you look at the amount of A's students are getting, most high schools and most colleges now are just mills. They're just mills. They're just throwing grades at these people. And this has been something that has been quite obvious if you know what to look for in the complexity of language on the internet. People are supposed to be really good writers. They're very good writers. They're supposed to be quite skilled at presenting information they use very few 4 and 5 syllable words well, especially when you see people making videos. They don't use like extrapolation, interpolation, correlation. These would never come up in their language. They would never refer to various foreign words because there's not a word for that in English. Um, like the Dharmapada, or something like that, the Kshatriya class, the warrior caste, of India, it's its own unique thing. So when you noticing that, where people, there's a level at which you see that there's people who are using language like that, but then you see this huge amount of people that all the words they're using are really small and they don't make rational arguments. They just are like feelings. I feel this. And you're seeing this now with the anti SJW crowd. These people are the new left. That is why they're so utterly baffling. Because you're sitting there thinking, how is it that you don't know you got owned? But of course, Shives can't be owned. Sean and Jen can't be owned. Copper Cab and all the Australasia weirdos. None of them can get owned because it's like they never concede to the very use of reason. Truly, they just don't. All of these people like this, any of these arguments with like these new communists, those kind of people, these anarcho-syndicalists and stuff. No, they don't believe in reason. Their worldview is this statement is false. And if you know your Aristotelian logic, that's not how the world works. And so that the objective universe, the phenomenal universe, doesn't work that way. When you're looking at a tree, you're seeing a tree. You could confirm it because it's real. You're perceiving it with your senses. It's just all this stuff that it's like, no, if these people are saying the world is magic and that it's actually being created by their mind at all times. This is tribal. This is like stuff from like the first few chapters of the Golden Bough. These are people who are at the tribal level. These are Rousseau's noble savages. They're reducing themselves to cave people. They're reducing themselves to savannah, poop chuckers and rock throwing savages. And they will come for you. Eventually, they will not be able to handle reality, and they'll come for you. The new left are the zombies you're getting ready for. That's my call. Later.